welcome to episode 7 of Broadcast Booth, stories from inside the headsets of play-by-play, and what is, for me, a very special guest. I'm Brian Jensen, host of the show, and maybe a little background is necessary for this one. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, huge sports fan, as I would guess many of you are as well. I participated in sports. I watched sports television. I listened to sports radio. In fact, I knew early on that I wanted to be in the sports broadcast business because of this guy. There was a local sportscaster on the local station, WFAA Channel 8 in Dallas, who was far and away the best I had ever heard and seen. Loved his ad-lib style and, heck, even hosted a game show for a while called Bowling for Dollars. And then when the big moments in Dallas Cowboy football seasons took place, as I grew up, it was his voice that I was hearing describe the action. Again, the best I'd ever heard. Now, that's how I originally got to know our guest for this episode. You may know him as the voice of the SEC, of March Madness, and of course, of the Masters. And maybe, most recently, as Uncle Verne. I am thrilled to introduce and welcome to Broadcast Booth Hall of Famer Verne Lundquist. I get goosebumps just saying that. Verne Lundquist is joining me on this program today. Verne, thank you.
Brian, you evoked so many memories for me just in the intro. I remember all those days. I was quite a bit skinnier, and that happens as you get older. I know that, but it's a real pleasure to be with you again. When you first contacted me, you asked the question, "Do you remember me?" Well, absolutely, I do. You followed me at Channel 8, albeit by 10 years or so. But some of the greatest memories I have from being involved in this craft were associated with WFAA TV and particularly the years I spent with the Dallas Cowboys. So it's my pleasure to be with you again this afternoon.
Well, and another quick story about that, Verne. So when I started at Channel 8, WFAA in Dallas, doing sports as the weekend sports guy and reporter, I was at a Cotton Bowl New Year's Eve party, and I realized across the room there was the gentleman who had really, been my mentor from afar in the broadcast world, and I went over and I said hello to you, and you said, "Excuse me, are you the new guy at Channel 8?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And you said, "You're doing a great job. Keep it up." And I just about fell to the floor when you said that, because I was just amazed that you knew. But now, after all these years, Verne, and knowing you and knowing the graciousness you have to just about everybody that you meet, it's certainly something that would be, I hate to say expected, but of you, and again, your graciousness, it was just a wonderful thing, and I thank you for that many, many years later.
Well, I appreciate that. Here's a little factoid that I find particularly amazing. I came to Dallas in 1967 in September, got the job after being rebuffed twice, finally was hired. And since September of 67, until I guess he recently announced his retirement, there have been 2 sportscasters at Channel 8 in Dallas, myself and Dale Hansen. That is an extraordinary stretch of history in sports television, I think. And I believe Dale just said he was going to hang it up and stay at his ranch in Waxahachie. But I've got great memories of those days, particularly the break I got with the Cowboys when Tex Schramm invited me. I was doing, initially, I was doing pregame, postgame, and halftime. And in that role, I was a partner with Bill Mercer, who's still living. He's in his mid-90s now. And Blackie Sherrod, the late, I think, one of the great sports writers in the history of sports journalism in this country. And so I was at the Ice Bowl in Green Bay in that role. And just a quick aside about that. In those days, CBS would assign broadcast teams to specific teams. And Frank Gleber was the CBS representative doing the Cowboys. He proceeded Jack Buck. And but anyway, at the Ice Bowl game, we stayed in the Northland Hotel, and I'll never ever forget the wake up that I received. Good morning, Mr. Lundquist. It's 7:30 and sunny, and the current temperature is 13 degrees below zero. It got worse, of course, but to be there, and I remember interviewing Don Meredith, Bob Lilly, George Andre, who suffered frozen feet from that game, Mel Renfro. And the great thing about that association, Brian, is that we all grew old together. And Calvin Hill and I remain attached, he and Janet, because of the birth of Grant Hill, who's done fairly well with his life, 19 years in the NBA. And I'm segueing all over the place here, but these are all great memories for me. Calvin and Janet were very, very close friends of mine. And I knew Janet was expecting. And so I asked Calvin, please give me a call when your son, they did know that, when your son is born. And he called me on a Friday morning, October the 5th, afternoon, important to the development of the story. And he said, this morning, Janet gave birth to a son whom we're going to name Grant Henry Hill. And I announced it on Channel 8 that night. And appropriately, that Sunday afternoon, they played the Pittsburgh Steelers, early October 72. And fittingly, with the game on the line, Dallas was trailing 13-10. And Landry called for an option pass. Calvin rolled out to his right, heaved it 50 yards in the air to a diving Ron Sellers, and the Cowboys won 17-13. Now, fast forward 20 years to March 28th of 1992. And here I am working with Len Elmore, and we're doing Duke, Kentucky.
2.1 seconds left.
With 2.1 seconds left, Kentucky was leading by 1. And here's Grant Hill, unguarded, by the way, at 6'8", and he heaved the equivalent in my mind, of my fantasy mind, of Calvin Hill throwing a 50-yard touchdown pass. So he heaved it 70 feet, and it curved a little bit, but Laettner caught it, took a step here, turn around, jump shot. And I looked behind the bench, and there were Calvin and Janet Hill. And I got, in wrapping up the game, because it's still regarded as one of the greatest games ever played in college basketball, I got to tell that story before we left the air. And Grant, I was with Grant at basketball seminar when I was still doing basketball. And I told him about that, and he hadn't heard it. And I said, no, I announced you. And Roger Staubach takes credit for naming him Grant Henry Hill, because Calvin wanted to honor his dad. And Janet said, Calvin, there's no way a son of mine is going to go through life known as Henry Hill.
Hmm.
And Roger said, how about you name him Grant? That's a perfect name. So there you are.
That's
and
awesome.
See, that evokes great memories for me.
That's great stuff. And of course, now you also not just one of the greatest broadcasters of all times, but you are a fabulous storyteller. Everybody that has listened to you over the years knows that. You talk a little bit about the radio side of things, and I'm always interested in asking great broadcasters like yourself, when you left isn't the right word, when you transitioned from radio broadcasting into the television side of things, in radio, you're painting the picture of the mind. In television, you of maybe all television broadcasters that I know have done such a great job of being a minimalist, if you will, to make sure that the game carries the story. Tell me about that transition. I mean, it just seems, I think, to those on the outside, a lot more difficult than you made it appear.
Well, I'm pleased that you look at it that way. In my memory and in my evaluation of my career, there's a dramatic, could be traumatic too, between radio and television, because in radio, for the most part, you carry the broadcast in the direction in which you want it to go. In television, you're very much at the dictates of the producer and, more specifically, the director. And in my case, I've had is Pat Hayden, one of my favorite partners ever. And in my estimation, you must be confined to what the viewer can see. And we've all made that mistake. You think like an old radio person, I'm going to carry this in this direction. Well, you can't. And I've done it many times early in the transition. You've got to be reliant upon the director and hope that if you hint at something, he'll follow your lead. But more often than not, and I think all of us have violated this rule, you've really got to limit yourself to what the viewer can see. And so in that sense, Brian, it's very much a director's medium more than it is an announcer's medium. And what you hope for, we all do, you're assigned to a game, you hope that something dramatic or exciting will evolve in the evolution of that game, in the process of that game. And then the task is to be verbally equipped to handle the moment. And I've been blessed, and there's no other way to describe it, over these years. Many guys, I'm thinking of my colleague, Jim Nantz, and I've worked with him. His first Augusta ever happened to be Jack Nicklaus in '86, which is memorable on a number of occasions because it was Jack. And Jim worked the 16th hole that year. And I do believe that he's perhaps the greatest golf host that this medium has ever seen. He loves this sport more than any other, and he's more comfortable, in my view, of doing the golf telecast. I happen to think he and Nick Faldo are hands down the best twosome in the 18th booth. But Jim essentially has never been presented with the same opportunities that I have, essentially. And then you pray that your abilities are equal to the challenge. And
that brings up such a great time frame, time period, and the way you handled it. You mentioned Nicklaus. There's, of course, the Tiger shot. There, you mentioned the Laettner shot a little earlier. There's the kick six. The one I remember most is, well, not maybe most, but first is the Jackie Smith drop. But sorry, I had to bring that up. But all of those, you know, I know you've been asked to rank them and all those kinds of things. We're not going there because I think they're all just the greatest. But the thing that jumps out at me as a play-by-play guy is so many guys try to come up with a word. So many guys try to almost pigeonhole a phrase or something like that. Tell me how, oh my goodness, and yes, sir, how that came out of your brain, because it's pretty obvious it was real time. It was something that just came up and came out.
Well, I will not rank them, but my personal favorite, because it was Jack Nicklaus, is always going to be 17th hole in 86. I'll give you a little background about the Jackie Smith call, because that is such a poignant memory for me and for every Cowboy fan. We had just developed the ability to go live from remote venues. And so we were in Fort Lauderdale at the Galt Ocean. No. We were at the Pier 66 Galt Ocean Mile of Super Bowl XIII a few years ago. But anyway, Tex Schramm, along with Pete Rozelle and Frank Gifford, believe it or not, they allowed this at that time. They had purchased a marina in Key West. And one of the perks came with the ability to try own a 48-foot yacht. So Tex had it for the Super Bowl, and he brought it up from Key West and parked it outside. And we're going live. So back in Dallas, Fort Worth, Troy and Tracy Rowlett, Troy and Iola were our brilliant weatherman and anchors. And so I had Jackie Smith on Tex Schramm's yacht for a live shot for our 10 o'clock news. Now, we were thrilled we got to do that. And Jackie willingly agreed. He had announced that was going to be his last year. And so here's a guy, 13 years in the NFL, with the Cowboys, one and only year. This is my last time. And I said, what would be the best possible ending to this potential Hall of Fame career? And he said, to catch a meaningful pass in a Cowboy victory. And then came the moment. And it would have tied the game. It was third and goal from the 11. And Roger Staubach says, no, Jackie wasn't responsible. He was so wide open that I took a little bit off the pass. I didn't fire it in. And so Jackie was expecting a bullet in the midsection, and it came in at a kind of an off speed.
Oh, bless his heart. He's got to be the sickest man in America.
And he dropped it. And Roger will tell you, almost without prompting, they practiced that play all week long, from third and goal from the 5-yard line. They were at the 11. And Roger wanted to make sure, so he pulled back on it. And there you go. And the really sad part of it is that Jackie was so embarrassed by that. Now, that's not to say the Cowboys would have won. It would have tied the game in the third quarter. But he never came back for any of the reunions.
Yeah.
And that was very
As,
sad.
yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you knew this or not. I wrote a book in 2001, Where Have All Our Cowboys Gone? And it's a book about what happened to the players after they left the playing field, after they left the spotlight. Because as you know, back in the day, they all had they either had jobs that they had to go to, or whatever the case may be, to earn a living. And about the only player that wouldn't participate in an interview for the book was Jackie. So he still carried that. Yeah.
Very sad to learn, but not surprising. That Roger got his start because you're right, Brian. All of those guys were paid such, by today's standards, minuscule wages. They all had to have secondary jobs. And Rogers was it Henry Miller?
Yeah.
Real estate guy? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And he didn't do very well with that business.
No.
He sold it for $628 million.
Yeah, it was the Staubach Company, and then sold to JLL.
And Roger and Marianne and Nancy and I remain really good friends. We have dinner with them at least once or twice a year, and we're going to be in Austin in November for a fundraiser for a separate organization called the Headliners Club, and Roger's going to be my guest. But we stay in touch, and to our everlasting gratitude.
So I still gotta get the word from you. Oh my goodness, and yes, sir, came from where?
Yes, sir. I vividly remember that, and because it was Jack, and because that was, other than the Jackie Smith call, which had its own degree of poignancy. Mm-hmm. When it was Jack, I can almost tell you every single stroke he took on that second nine. And famously, Frank Cherkinian was our producer then, the late Frank Cherkinian. He was Armenian American, and he stood about 5'4". He was a dandy. He had a thick thatch of curly white hair. He always wore a cashmere jacket, a button-down collar, nicely pressed slacks, and the latest in Gucci loafers, of course, without socks. You didn't wear socks in those days. Anyway, when Jack and Lance Barrow, who's retired now, took Frank's place as a producer, Lance was the associate producer, and he stood one row behind in the production truck, and he would let Frank know what they had on replay or what was coming up. And so Jack birdied the ninth. Now he started the day 4 rounds back. He birdied the ninth, and Lance was a man of enormous girth, and his nickname among all of us was Buddha. And Lance puffed himself up and said, "Frank, we've got a tape of Jack with a birdie on 9. And Frank turned around and he said, "Buddha, if you're going to succeed in this business, you've got to learn the art of telling a story. And Jack Nicklaus is not a part of this story." And so then he birdied 10. And Lance said, "Oh boy, here we go." And he said, "Frank, we've got Jack with a birdie at 10. And Cherkinian just turned around and stared at Lance and said, "Okay, guys, roll the tape of Jack on 9 and then 10. And from that point on, he didn't take a step that we didn't have on live for the rest of the round. And, I vividly remember how things evolved. He was trailing Seve Ballesteros, and as Jack was teeing off on 17, Seve was putting it in the water back at 15. He double bogeyed the hole. And now all of a sudden, Jack, unbeknownst to Jack, is tied for the lead. And he pulls his tee shot to the left. And he had a clear opening. He had 125 yards to the green. Pulled out a wedge, put it 12 feet. And I can remember thinking to myself, because we bounce around and they went somewhere else in the live telecast. And I thought, this is Jack Nicklaus. And if he makes this putt, he's got a chance to take the lead. So as he's walking up, I did think to myself, whatever you say, keep it brief and get out of the way.
Maybe. Yes, sir!
I cheated a little bit because I pretended like this far away. It was like this. And just instinctively, I said maybe. And then, and now I hope you'll enjoy this little anecdote. David Faraday and I remain very close friends. And I sent him a text last week about watching the final round of the PGA. And then we taped David's shows. And this was from 4 or 5 years ago, a tape of Jack. And David alluded to Jack's 1,000-yard frozen face stare. And boy, he could send lasers through you. And so at Augusta 2 years ago, we were at the Champions. We were not at the Champions dinner, but we have dear friends from Sea Island, Georgia, who are members of Augusta. And they invited Nancy and me, Bill and Lynn Griffin, and they've become very close friends. So we were having dinner with them in the trophy room, part of the clubhouse. And the Champions dinner broke up. Jack came down. He was standing over against the wall, and he was chatting with Ben Crenshaw. I've known Ben since he was a junior in high school. And we're very good friends. And so I ventured over, and I don't remember, I just intruded. And I said, Jack, I finally, after all these years, I finally figured out what really made the call with your putt. Really, it was synchronicity. And because when I was saying, yes, sir, with a little more emphasis than that, Jack was reacting, and he took his fist down and then punched the sky. And it was almost in perfect timing with my word.
Yes, sir!
I got the 1,000-yard frozen face stare. He didn't want to talk about it. And I kind of slinked off and thought, well, I'll keep that theory to myself. But it is a pretty good theory.
The great thing about sports and the great thing about your career, Verne, is that it's all out there. Especially now with the internet, you can go find it, and people will watch this, and they're going to go find that clip again, and they're going to hear it and play it.
Oh, I'm just looking over my shoulder. See the green rug back right there?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going the wrong way. There we are.
You weren't a weatherman. You were a sports guy.
Yeah, that's right. That is a Faribault Mills in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They have marketed that. It's a throw rug. They call it a throw rug. And they were kind enough. Well, no, they weren't kind enough. A friend of mine said, look what is available now. So I paid for it. I did pay for it. No freebies. So anyway.
Well, interesting that you point that out. I'm going to show a couple of pictures that I believe the Steamboat Springs, one of the Steamboat Springs publications put these images out. And some of the memorabilia that you have in your place there, and it just must be some incredible memories and incredible conversations when friends of yours are able to walk through there and take a look at some of that great stuff. And you know what? It's not a bad scene. Not a bad scene back in your backwoods either.
Well, that's our back deck, and this was, I think, must have been a nice day in May or something. No, not earlier than that. But Nancy and I moved from Dallas to Steamboat Springs. I had learned to ski here in '71, but that's not the reason we moved here. We moved here because of the summers, and we both quit skiing 10, 12 years ago.
It's a beautiful, beautiful country. Beautiful country. Now, we've talked a little bit about the Masters, obviously. We've talked a little bit about, March Madness and Laettner and such. Haven't really talked about the SEC yet and your work there, because I am very curious about, your feelings on all the sports that you've done, because there are so many, quite frankly, that you've done. I've been told it's 20. We all know about the Olympics and the skating, and understand you've done some horse calling or horse broadcasting.
Yeah. I mean, I did the World Horse Jumping Championships in Aachen, what was then West Germany.
Gesundheit.
Yes, with the guy, and offbeat stuff. I did the it was called the National Sports Festival. And the one I did in '80 was in Syracuse, New York. And I covered 3 events there: weightlifting, indoor speed skating with Eric Heiden, or speed skating. Well, it was indoor, and archery. Now, I'm probably the only guy you've known. I was really brilliant at that. He missed the bullseye. Oh, good, he hit the bullseye. And I had no analyst. Well, I guess there is a reason for an analyst in archery. But when I said, I was very blessed about 7, 8 years ago to receive the Vin Scully Lifetime Achievement Award, presented on behalf of Fordham University, which is where Vin graduated, and went to work with the late Red Barber right out of college, doing the Brooklyn Dodgers. Bob Costas was invited because he was a previous winner, and these were some pretty big names in our craft. And Bob didn't make it because turns out he had a son graduating from high school that night. But he called me, and Vin doesn't travel. So Scully did the introduction to me from Dodgers press box in Los Angeles. And I remember vividly his punchline was, his bio claims he's done 20 sports. Vern, name them all. And I had no response. We were doing an event at my alma mater the next day in Seguin, Texas Lutheran. And Bob Costas, and we've been good friends for a number of years. He called me. And he said, I'm sorry I couldn't be there. That was my son's graduation. But he said, I've got to ask you a question. When Vin Scully introduced you, did that not cause the hair on your forearms to stand at attention? And I said, boy, it really did. Scully's got the greatest call I've ever heard in sports.
But the game right now is at the plate. High fly ball into right field. She is gone!
And Scully laid out after saying, it is gone.
Yes.
Not a word. And then Gibson goes all the way around second, third, comes home, crosses the plate, still nothing. He goes into the dugout. Van's calling back out. He emerges. Van hasn't said a word. Gibson goes back in. Now he comes out for the second time. And only when the noise, perfectly timed, when the noise began to subside, Vin Scully said, in a year of the impossible, the improbable has occurred.
Yeah.
In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
Perfect.
Magnificent.
And because I was lucky enough to get his award named after him, we've been in touch. And I asked him once, how do you come up with that? And he said, I don't know, but it was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah.
It also speaks back to what you said early on in our conversation about, and I mentioned this because I do think that this is one of the great attributes of your broadcasting skills is the ability to time what you say, lay out when it's best, and make sure that the game carries the game, because that's where the excitement all comes and should come from. The passion and all the emotion that you're going to bring from your voice is there, but putting it in the right place and saying it at the right times is so important. You just mentioned that with Vin, and obviously you did the same and do the same thing in your world.
Well, again, you've got to have the opportunity. That's, you've got to be presented with something momentous, memorable, and then it's up to you as a craftsman to find a proper, recognize that shot. Boy, that was the last Army-Navy
emotional
game.
moment. Yeah.
Boy, was it ever. And Nancy was standing maybe 10 feet away to my left. And when I started mentioning her, that's when I couldn't hold it together. But all those years, and to have it, my favorite game always was Army-Navy. And that's Gary Danielson. That, I think, was the SEC championship game. And Gary and I could not be more polar opposites in terms of personality. Let me show you something right here, because it will go with this little anecdote. That's Gary is he's very, very private until he gets on the air. He's got the greatest knack for predicting what's going to come than anybody. But here's my anecdote. Gary we were at Alabama. It's a large press box, two-tiered, and Gary was overdoing his notes in the bottom row where we sit, and he was in the far corner, and he was just concentrating, writing little notes to himself. And I was up on the second level, and I'm, yahooing with SIDs and athletic directors, and because I'm a sociable guy, and I figured, well, I've done all the prep work. There's nothing more I'm going to learn other than going over the charts one more time. I'm a social animal. And Gary was asked, and somebody was doing a column on Gary. And he said, look at Verne. Look at him back there. I'm concentrating on everything I've got written down. I want to get it framed in my mind. And he said, I would no sooner do what he's doing right now than put an ice pick in my eye. Here's what he said. I don't know if you can read that.
Oh, yeah.
You see it?
Yes.
It's an ice pick.
That is hilarious.
And I keep
That is
it
hilarious.
right in front of me.
Careful now. You be careful with that thing.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I'll move it around very carefully here.
There are a lot of moments too off the air. You mentioned the Vin Scully Award. A lot of awards, a lot of tributes have come your way. Obviously, all of them very, very honorable, and this one I think is a great one. The commencement speech at the college that you went to school at, right? Texas Lutheran.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that was 2 days after I received the Vin Scully Award. We flew down. The Scully Award was on a Friday, and that's when Costas called me, and we were staying. And what a great honor! I served on the Board of Regents for 21 years, I think, interrupted by you serve 7 and then 1 year off. But one of the blessings I've received in my life was to be a very proud graduate of Texas Lutheran College when I was there. But it's a liberal arts school, 1,400 now. There were 900 when I was there 50 years ago. More than that even. But I love that school. And it's not the most beautiful campus in the world, but we have a generous alumni base who've allowed us to build a world-class fine arts center. Big timers in there for a lecture series or, musicians of the highest order. And I couldn't be prouder of my degree.
Well, as we try to help those that are possibly wanting to be in the broadcast business, Verne, I'm curious. I'm assuming reflexes are an important thing. Either that or having a color analyst who has and you would think that Jim Spanarkel would have the ability to just reach over there and swat that thing away.
You would think so. All American. You would think so, but no.
No. So it is interesting that I know are approached by so many people to tell the stories of your career. You of course have the book that you wrote a few years back, Play by Play, with a lot of stories in there. And I'm just again so appreciative of you sharing time with us to tell some of these great stories. We didn't go down the path of who the hell is Happy Gilmore, although I know that's something that people ask you about all the time.
That is the gift it's a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
and here's why. Because it keeps me connected to 2 generations removed from my era, and college kids eat that thing up. It's a silly comedy starring Adam Sandler. You can't see it from this view, but up on the wall behind me, I've got a picture of Adam Sandler, and remember in the movie the caddy had a bushy beard.
Yeah.
But we shot all that in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's only been 25 years ago, 1996.
It just doesn't make sense, does it? It's just hard to believe.
No.
Another thing too that I know you had fun with. Of course, you have fun. It is pretty obvious just about anything that you do. But being on the set with the guys at College Game Day, obviously a fun time for you. And
that was at the Alabama game, yeah.
And I'm curious about, and then you all obviously had have brushes with greatness at times. But here's the thing that gets me most of all, Verne. Some people have bobbleheads. Verne Lundquist has his own card, his own NFL collectible card. That's pretty amazing.
Do you know when that picture was published? 1989.
Wow.
89. Costas is in that group. Al Michaels is in it. Pat Summerall, of course, was the most dominant sportscaster of that time. He's in it. And I'm going to show you something. Look here. See what those are?
Yes.
Those are that card. I get them
I'll
at
be
least
darned.
4 times a week.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That
and
is amazing.
I addressed those yesterday, and Nancy will somewhat resignedly will say, "You got more cards to sign."
That is awesome.
And you know what? What an honor it is for me. I mean, how long does that take? Self-addressed staff, and now with the internet, you can. I got curious. I swear I'm the last of the old dinosaurs. No, I'm not the last. But Google is one of the great inventions of my lifetime, but I just will not, because of the downside of social media. Trust me, folks, I do not have a Twitter account. I don't use Facebook. I don't use Instagram. None of that. However, if you Google, and you can find anything on Google, 2 weeks ago, I just followed the prompts, and I wind up with a list. We live on Natchez Way in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And it's a cul-de-sac. I think there are 15 homes on it. And we're toward the end. And this prompting led me to some kind of a information center that listed the owners of every home on Natchez Way and your political affiliation. And I just, I thought that was private.
Is there anything private anymore?
No. But you shared a photo that was taken. I was working with Clark Kellogg and of President Obama, and that was, and I'm still am a big fan of his. And that autograph he signed it to me, and he said, "Verne, thanks for giving me the audition." But we're not right wing. We're the opposite. However, my brother is just on the other side, and so are his 2 sons. And one of his sons is in here. They were up for a skiing vacation, and he stared at that picture, and then he finally said, "Well, where's your picture of Trump?" And I said, "Dean, he didn't make the cut." And so that's as far as I'll go politically.
Yeah,
but
I imagine there's some good family firebacks though.
Yeah, and we
understand how that goes.
And his 2 sons and his daughter, and their grandkids. They live in Austin, but no, we've agreed. Hands off.
I hear you. Okay, so I'm going to close with a couple quick things, Verne, that I just wanted to share with you. You have a story, and again, a lot of these stories you can find them on, other writings or your book or other areas. But I know that your interest in sports, especially football and those kinds of things, Notre Dame, Texas, 1952. You mentioned that you were in the concessions area of that situation. Back in the 70s, I was on a swim team in Dallas, and our fundraiser was to do a concession stand at Texas Stadium. And I worked that concession stand, and I walked out into the portal, and I saw Thomas Hollywood Henderson take a reverse on a kickoff and go the distance for a touchdown, and just was one of the most fabulous moments that I remembered. So when I heard you tell that story about the concessions, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's I don't want to say weird, but it's kind of weird. I mean, this is the guy that I've always respected, and he has so many similar stories. Okay, one more for you. So I'm doing the Tech A&M game in 2002. I'd had a little bit of a rough ride in the first couple of years following Jack Dale. It's always tough to follow a legend. And this particular game was not on television, so everybody had to listen if they wanted to pay attention, right, of what was going on. So Wes Welker takes a punt return back for a touchdown, and I'm making the call, and as he goes down the sideline, gets into the end zone. In my mind, you mentioned this earlier, something flashed in my mind that I was going to say, oh, my God. And then I thought, wait a minute, Lubbock Baptist, Bible Belt, I probably shouldn't say that. So the words that came out of my mouth, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up to you, was, oh my goodness. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, that I don't say that. Why did that come out of my mouth? And then I go back to what I've heard you say so many times, and it just was stuck in my mind that, okay, oh my goodness, must work here. It certainly worked for the great Verne Lundquist, so it must work, and that's what came out of my mouth at that time. So those are two things that I think kind of tie us together just a little bit that I wanted to end with.
Well, as I told you when you first contacted and said, I may be repeating this, he said, do you remember me? And I wrote him back immediately, and I said, yes, I do remember you. I absolutely do. And I really congratulate you. What a career, and see what what I most missed about the opportunity and the benefit of going with a national network, but I love the allegiance. And Jack Dale, you with Texas Tech, Frank Fallon, at Baylor. I mean, and Bill Mercer with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Now he's widowed, and we stay in touch maybe once every 6 months, and I'll just check to make sure he's still upright. And and he's doing great. But I love the loyalty.
It is
Ron
fun.
Franklin had it with the University of Texas.
Yeah.
And Ron has a little bit of a temper, and it didn't serve him well.
No.
But I do. I mean, you think about universities and people who are in the broadcast sense, who have made their career in support of that university and describing their athletic teams. They have my utmost admiration. I miss that. I missed it in the SEC, you know.
We miss you, Verne. I'm telling you, we miss you. All the great calls are obviously something we have, not just in our memory bank, but they fortunately are accessible, and we can replay them. And I'm just so thrilled and thankful. Bless you for joining me today, and just bless you in general. You are such a terrific human being. I appreciate everything.
Brian, I thank you for the opportunity and for your friendship. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Verne. So that's Verne Lundquist. You all know him. You all love him. And hopefully some of the stories that you heard here today are something that will carry on with you. Do want to mention very quickly where you can catch all of the information from Broadcast Booth. Not only can you get that from the YouTube channel that you're watching here, but also on the podcasts that you might subscribe to. And then again, anywhere else on social media. Verne may not have a Twitter account. He may not have the Facebook, but we have to be there, right? So we're there. You can check us out at any time. Appreciate you watching and listening to this.